Well, joining me now, as he does every week, is the foreign editor of The Australian, Greg Sheridan, who got stuck into the government this morning and said Penny Wong's more powerful than Richard Marles. And Greg, thanks for joining us. You've gone bang again in your column this morning. I noticed Penny Wong not coming at that she's more powerful than Richard Marles. What do you think?
Well, Andrew, I don't think anyone in Canberra doubts that Penny Wong is far more powerful than Richard Marles. I mean, one of the weird things in the defence budget this year is that, tens of millions or perhaps more than $100 million of defence money is going to foreign affairs. Well, because they're going to do things on AUKUS and Pacific Islands and so on. Well, if the government thinks that's what should happen, it ought to cut the defence budget and increase the DFAT budget. But I think Richard is a very good guy. His heart's in the right place, but he has simply failed dismally in this portfolio so far. All the AUKUS sub-arrangements are good, but when the DSR was commissioned, the government and the DSR folks were telling us this is an urgent matter. We have to get capabilities in the next 3 years, the next 5 years, the next 7 years, the next 10 years. And they didn't publish the DSR. They censored the DSR, not because of national security considerations, but because they were embarrassed about the DSR's recommendations. Scrap the Hunter frigates, move immediately to corvettes, and so on. And what we're getting out of it is nothing. As I outlined in the column today, the government is effectively reducing defence expenditure. If you take its ridiculous claim that it's given $710 million in military aid to Ukraine, well, that's $710 million straight out of defence. So Angus Houston, the key architect of the DSR, told us these are the worst strategic circumstances in his entire lifetime. And the government's response is that in 10 years' time, we will get one nuclear-powered submarine, and by 2050, we'll have a fleet of nuclear-powered submarines. Now, it's not a political bias or anything. I mean, I love these folks as much as anyone else, but this is just a tragedy for our nation, and it's a failure by Richard Marles, whereas Penny Wong has succeeded in all the things she's wanted from the budget and for her department and in her policy area.
Well, she disputes that, I might add. But anyway, just moving on, one of the things you talk about is defence personnel and people leaving the force, but is that not just the consequence of a tight labour market? Would it take higher wages in defence to arrest this?
So it's a bit of everything, Andrew, and of course, you can't posit one cause. But when they abolished when they reduced by half the self-propelled howitzers and cut most of the infantry fighting vehicles, I think that was the right thing to do. But that meant the old image of the Army as a fully mechanised, mobile land force, which is not relevant to Australia, but that was its old image, that fell apart. So the Army's raison d'etre ceased to exist. Now, the proper ethos for the Army is to be a miniature US Marines, but you've got to go out and inspire the troops with that vision, instead of which the troops can see that all the projects have been delayed, all the projects have been abolished. People join the military partly for the salary, but mainly to serve their country and to have the experience. Now, the sense of confusion and drift, the only reason they can manage the defence budget at all is because they cut out the submarines, they cut the infantry fighting vehicles, they cut the howitzers, all fair enough moves, but they're only fair enough if you're replacing them with real capabilities. And anyone from inside that organisation knows that across the Defence Department and in the Australian Defence Force, morale is shot to pieces, there's tremendous confusion, and they're in a terrific panic of trying to cut programs left, right and centre because the government is asking them to do more things with less money. It's not possible in the physical universe.
All right, what can we expect in terms of this AUSMIN meeting this Friday? Is there any significance to it or not really?
Well, I think the bilateral meetings will occur on Friday. Secretary of State and Foreign Minister, Secretary of Defence and Defence Minister. Then the big AUSMIN meeting on Saturday. So bilateral's Friday, AUSMIN Saturday. AUSMIN is always immensely significant. There are very few countries in the world to which the US devotes as much attention. To get the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Defence together, devoting 2 days entirely to Australia is a huge thing. Both Blinken and Austin have significant Pacific Island programs associated with this visit. That's very, very much in our interest that America is more active in the Pacific. And That's partly a result of our good diplomacy. It's partly a result of what the Americans are doing. There will be some announceables, there always are, but they'll be minor because any big announceables will be kept for Albanese's visit to Biden. But I think you'll see, some further joint studies, all that kind of, sort of make busy sort of stuff. And the Americans, of course, might announce what they're doing with their forces in Australia, because unlike Australia, they actually have some forces to do things with.